All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Strive for Good Life podcast. My name is Nino Pinguera, and I'm here with Kristen Kubik, who is the founder and CEO of Business Unfiltered LLC, which is a marketing agency. Super excited to have her on the show. So welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here and have the conversations today.
Yeah, the last conversation we had was really good, so I'm excited for this one. But let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So maybe tell the audience kind of those early influences in your life and why you decided to get into entrepreneurship.
Oh my gosh, definitely. I honestly, one of my favorite influences that I always talk about is one of my dance teachers whenever I was growing up. I did competition dancing for 16 years, and my favorite teacher ever, she actually owned her studio. And I think it was my 6th or 7th grade project. I actually got to interview her, and I asked her all about her business and how she ran it and why she did it and all these things. And it struck such a nerve in me to just want to have my own business. And it was so fun just to watch other people around me, like whether they were in corporate or ran their own businesses or maybe had a side hustle, and why they did the things they did and made the choices they did. And it really influenced like kind of how I did things and why.
Okay, so you had an interest really early on then in just business in general and wanting to be your own boss. What was kind of the allure of that for you, really? I mean, what was it, just having freedom over your own time, or what were the elements there that drew you to it?
I think it was more along the lines of not just the freedom of my own time, but it was, and this sounds so ridiculous sometimes, but it's kind of not having to answer to anyone else. Like, I was one of those people that while I was fine working another job, like for somebody else, I grew up waitressing, I worked in food service for a really long time, and I did so many different things. I really hated having a boss. Like, I just wanted to be able to like have my own clients, have my own buyers. Like, I had a product-based business at one point. I have always had clients for marketing. I've done so many different things in so many different realms that I just always knew I wanted to be like, I guess, the boss. And I hated that kind of like you have to work up the ladder in the corporate world is a really good way to put it.
Right. That's not a model that I personally like, so I can understand that completely. So let's talk about some of those things that you did early on. You mentioned waitressing, but what was kind of your evolution in terms of the jobs you had to then going into business yourself?
Yeah. So my very first job, I was a hostess. And that same restaurant, I ended up kind of working my way up to waitressing. I was a milkshake bartender. We didn't serve alcohol, but we did serve like a ton of different milkshakes. And anyone who listens to this and kind of knows what the restaurant is, they're going to get it without me actually saying it. So we had a ton of different milkshakes. We had like 1 pound burgers that like people had their pictures on the wall for. It was so much fun to just be around people all the time for me. And that's when I knew I wanted to just work with people. And I didn't just want to sit behind a desk. And when I graduated college, I actually graduated with a marketing degree, but also a business degree. And the business degree was just because I didn't really know what else I wanted, but I had some extra classes I had to take. And when I did that, I had moved to the Baltimore, D.C. area. I got a job in marketing. It was the most boring thing I think I'd ever done in my life. I was so bored in just sitting behind my desk, answering emails, creating like PDFs for people. And I was so just blah. And I missed that people aspect, honestly. And one of my favorite things I revert back to was an internship that I'd actually done while I was in college, an undergrad. And I was in the sports marketing team for the Reese's, now it's Reese's, the Senior Bowl. And so I got to do like a ton of like college, like football stuff. I got to do a bunch of with like the NFL. It was so much fun. But again, it was like that being around people, right? So it was such a big driving factor to just wanting to make sure I stayed around like and working with people versus like being back behind that desk in that corporate world that I almost ended up in.
Yeah, okay. So you just got sick of not having that kind of interaction that really got you inspired and that you enjoyed. Is that what led you to just saying, you know what, screw this, I'm going to go out on my own? Or how did that transition happen?
So the transition actually happened unwillingly. I was actually at the time I had quit my marketing job and I started working with a small business, and it was just like a local veterinary hospital. I was doing their event management, I was doing their social media, their emails, things like that. And I actually got fired. And it was something completely out of my control. It wasn't anything like insane, but at the same time, I didn't really want to go back to work for anybody else. So I was just kind of like, what if I just throw myself into this full time? Like I can do it. I know I can. And then had like this, I refuse to lose mentality. And it is easily become like almost like my motto, I guess, because it's the thing I always revert back to. And yeah, that was definitely the thing that kind of drove me into going full time in my business. And it's kind of that hidden blessing, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so let's talk about that refuse to lose mentality. Like how did you build that? Because a lot of people, they'll maybe leave their job, but they have a hard time fully committing. And so in the back of their mind, they're like, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just play it safe and I'll get another job. So tell us about the mentality of refusing to lose.
It's so funny because every now and then I still have that kind of like, I guess that thought process of it's fine if this doesn't work, I'll just go to McDonald's and get a job, right? And I feel like you're not an entrepreneur if you haven't ever had that thought process at least once. And the refuse to lose mentality really came into play during my divorce, because my ex-husband and I, we were not on good terms. We had a really messy divorce. We were doing really everything we could to not only separate, but to also throw each other under the bus. I won't even blame it on just him. Like we were both really awful to each other. And it's one of those things I look back now on and I just kind of like cringe. But it came to a point where I had bills. I had so many bills that I could not fathom not being able to pay them. I was $42,000 in debt between school loans, lawyer bills, regular bills, credit card debt that I hadn't even known about. And that was a point where I just went, no, like I'm making this work. I refuse not to. And I just kept saying it over and over. Like, I refuse not to make this work. And that's the only mentality I've ever kept since.
Wow. It sounds like it's really served you well. That's interesting. So out of necessity, kind of had to develop that mindset, it sounds like, because, the situation you were in, that's pretty tough to be in a divorce and also not have maybe a reliable source of income. A lot of people, it's so easy to just say, I'm going to play it safe. Right. So that's interesting. And I always wonder, like what sets these type of people apart? Is there something that you think you could point to aside from just being able to tell yourself, that you refuse to lose or I don't know, is there something else that separates you?
I feel like what separates not even just me, but like people who like become successful in that position when you have nothing else to lose, right? Is number one, you have nothing else to lose. And number two, I feel like if you have that mentality of it's fine if this doesn't work, I can do something else, then you're already banking on that plan B, right? But if you don't have a plan B, then you're going to put all your eggs on plan A. You're going to put all your eggs in that basket. You're going to make sure that you're doing everything possible to make sure that something works and something sticks. And I feel like when we're talking about maybe people who make it and are successful, maybe when they've like actually had really awful things happen to them, not even just me, but other people in a lot of different situations, they are so, and as much as I hate this word, I'll use it anyway, resilient in the amount of things they are not willing to settle for. And they just keep going. And it's because you really know you don't have a choice otherwise.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's this element of refusal to settle. That's interesting. It makes me reflect on my own life and where I've refused to settle. Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about actually, getting your agency off the ground then. So did you just jump into like, all right, I'm going to be my own boss, I'm going to get my own clients, or how did you go about that?
It's so funny because I actually started it not even just as a full-on marketing agency. I started it as graphic design. So I started it with just like offering logos to kind of friends that I had that I knew had businesses, but maybe they had their logos done on like Microsoft Word. Right. We all know those like cute little like Word done, and they're like the clip art and things like that. No, they looked so bad. And we all know that now, but everyone thought they were so good a few years ago. But then I started actually, because I was self-taught in Photoshop and a few other things like Adobe Illustrator and things like that, I started actually just offering logos to people. And they were cheap. They weren't even like maybe $150. And the graphic design community cringed at what I did and they hated me for it. And I was fine with that because my bills were getting paid. I didn't care. And when I did that, I created a Facebook page and I was like, sure, yeah, I guess I'll like do this. And then I had a PayPal link and that was it. And if people messaged me, then I just sent them a PayPal link, and then I built my like reputation on that, and I built referrals and community and things like that. And that was it. And it just went from there.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I remember this from our last conversation that you didn't start with much. So it was just the PayPal link, Facebook page. But let's dive into the strategy a little bit more, because you mentioned community. So the community element. So for anyone listening out there that is starting a business or considering doing what you're doing, right, that think they need a website up, they need, I don't know, all these complicated funnels, let's break down how was it Facebook groups, I think, that you mentioned that you just like, were you just DMing people, or like walk us through that a little bit about how you were actually getting clients?
Absolutely. First of all, I hated DMing people, so I didn't even touch DMs for the longest time unless people DM'd me first and said, how do I work with you? Or can you send me some samples or things like that? What I would do is I would find like entrepreneur Facebook groups or like local Facebook groups and things like that. And I would see people talking about like business stuff or graphic stuff or logos or things like that. And I would find where my expertise was, marketing wise or logo wise or whatever it was. And I would start commenting on their stuff. And I would say, hey, I know here's what you're asking. Here's what I think might actually be a better option for you instead. Or like I would answer their questions straight up. And I would tell them, look, I'm not trying to sell you anything. Here's just what I think is going to work really well for you. And then I would always follow it up. You're more than welcome to message me if you want to talk further. And I would give them that option, but then I would back off. It would be like nothing, like there's no strings attached, basically. And that was my favorite part about it, is people were able to create that conversation. I went in and I would just answer it, but then I also left with no strings attached because I didn't care, right? And oftentimes what we'll do, and it's funny, especially female entrepreneurs will do this a lot, is we'll put our emotion into it so hard and we'll internalize whether people answer back or not. And I had to really remove the emotion. And when I did, it made it so easy to just have a conversation with somebody, very similar to like this, for example. And it was so nice just to be able to have that. You're more than welcome to message me if you want. Not a big deal. Like, I would even tell some people, like, no strings attached. And I do it to this day. It does not bother me.
Yeah, okay. I love that. You said a couple of really key things there. So, first off, you would just go and add value. You would just share some expertise, give advice freely without any expectation. And then you just left it open for the conversation to continue. I love that, because so many people attach themselves to, oh man, I just need to get this sale. And so they go in kind of with this high pressure tactic of really trying to, everyone's got those DMs in their inbox, right? Where people are messaging them, trying to essentially start a sales conversation, and you see right through it. But your approach is completely different in that you just say, hey, here's some advice. If you want to keep talking, great. If not, no big deal. Right? Is that more or less what it is? Or
Absolutely, that's what it is. And even sometimes, like, and I've done this probably even a couple weeks ago. Like, maybe I have like an Instagram post that I know the person's really going to get value out of, that's going to answer their question even further. I'll drop the link and I'll say, look, no pressure. Here's a link to a post that I know you're going to get, like, that's going to answer your question further. Feel free to take a look if you want. And then oftentimes what they'll do is not only will they go like look at it and engage with it, they'll also like end up following me or end up DMing me and say, thank you so much, like da da da. And I think that alone, because you're completely right. A lot of the times, like, people just want the sale, but we forget that, like, these are human beings. Like, they're not just numbers. And a lot of like what I talk about, it's human first marketing. And that's the key, is making sure that you're just building community first by treating people like human beings.
absolutely. I mean, everything in business is about relationships. And if you view customers as people you actually want to build relationships with, right, it changes the outlook, and obviously it changes the results. I think that's amazing. I like the idea of, so you are creating content for your own channels, and then if it's relevant, you'll drop the links in for those people. I think that's awesome. That's some great advice. So let's talk about, building it up, because I know you took it to some awesome numbers, right? Your agency. And so what was that process like, and what had to evolve in, I'm assuming you started offering a lot more services besides just logo design. So like, let's maybe dive into that process, what you kind of changed about your business to grow it.
Yeah, absolutely. So for context, I have grown my business to 7 figures. I actually ironically, no longer offer like logo design. I will offer branding, like brand voice services, to kind of help you like dive into your messaging and actually like get a clear vision on what you're doing and who you're talking to. But a lot of like what I focus on now is making sure that you're building a community based on your actual ideal customer, your ideal buyer, your ideal client, however you want to phrase that, just depending on who you are. And a lot of what we'll do is like, we'll go through and we may do things like social media audits. And I have things priced maybe from like $200 to like 18,000. So like it goes from very accessible to very like, a little more premium. And in doing that, I feel like I've learned so much along the way that it makes it so easy for me to sit back and look at it and go, wow, these are the things I shouldn't have done. Like maybe work 24 hours a day, or like try to hustle my way to 100K, or like I really want like $30,000 months. Let me just not sleep and try to do everything myself versus like delegating and hiring an assistant, which has probably been the best hire that I've ever made. And all of these things, like they were such learning curves that I had the hardest time getting over, because I had such a hard time just like releasing the reins, that it was, I don't know how to put it. It was very, very challenging.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit, because you're right. Every entrepreneur, they want the quality control, right? So they want to do it themselves. They have this ideal, image in their mind of what it should look like, and they don't trust other people to recreate that or be able to live up to that expectation. So, how did you get yourself over it? Was it just the fact that you got to a breaking point, realizing you couldn't work any more hours, or what drew you to the conclusion that you needed to make that first hire?
No, it's funny because it was actually a fight I had with my husband. And he was just like, I never see you anymore. He was like, I had put a couch in my like downstairs office. I have an upstairs office, which is like, for context for listeners, where I'm at now. So I can do calls and interviews and like things like that. So no one will bother me. But then I have a downstairs office too, where like I could actually see things, and it's like right by the door and the dogs and things like that. I'd put a couch there because that was the only way my husband could come talk to me. And my husband was like, this is nonsense. You have to stop this. And I was like, but why? There's a couch. And he was like, are you kidding me? And he was like so irate about the fact that like the only time he ever saw me was right before bed, or if we went out with our friends on like a Wednesday night. And I eventually had to like back out and look at it, and I was like, I don't think I can keep like working like this, especially because like right now I'm also getting my master's degree. So it's like double whammy, and he's just over here like, okay, cool. I love this for you. And something's got to give, right? So yeah, I think it was mostly about like work-life balance, which I toss up on whether it's actually real or not, but it was definitely a big conversation.
Okay, that's interesting, because a lot of people struggle with that. Yeah, I mean, I personally know so many people that are workaholics and just completely throw themselves into whatever project they're on. And it is detrimental to family relationships, right? And then obviously getting enough sleep is important to be able to function. So how do you, I mean, because it sounds like you got a divorce. Did that contribute to that, or I don't know. Where have you gone with that since? Now that I don't know if you're single. I don't want to assume anything, right? But maybe talk about that a little bit.
So I'm actually married again.
Okay, great. Congrats. All right.
Thanks. So my new husband is actually the couch husband.
Okay.
He loves the fact that I have my own business. I actually was able to retire him in a sense, so he didn't have to go back to work. And he 1000%, while he supports what I do, that was the big conversation we had to have, was definitely like, if you're going to do this, I also would like to have like maybe this amount of time that you like dedicate to maybe like just home life. And I went, okay, cool, I can do that. And that was when I went, all right, so let's find an assistant. Let's see what they can take over and things like that. And it was one of those things where I had to really learn boundaries. And when we're talking about like work-life balance, the reason all of us struggle with it, I feel like, is because we don't want to put those boundaries in place, because we feel like we're going to lose out on money. We feel like we're not going to maybe like be seen on social media. We feel like, maybe we have a client that maybe pops up on Boxer and we're like, we have to answer it right this second, or an email or whatever it is. And like during this podcast interview, I've seen my Boxer go off about 4 times. And you still sometimes have that, like, I should answer that. But then you're like, no, I'll get to it when I get to it. Because you have to train yourself that way. Because we're such people pleasers. And like the instant gratification society that we have is so like, I want it now and I need it now. When in reality, nothing is that urgent. If it's not like detrimental to your actual well-being, it's not that urgent.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like your mindset has really shifted and you've learned a lot in the process of building your business. Are there resources or like, things that help you develop your mindset around all this stuff? Or is this just all trial by error for you?
99% of it is trial by error. A lot of it is life experience. Whenever I was like the reason I started my business obviously was because I went through a divorce. During one of my biggest launches, my mom died in the middle of it. And like there were so many other things that have happened along the way, but those are like the 2 biggest ones. And it's been such a big like, can you do this? Can you not? Like trial, error, cause, effect type thing that you just kind of learn as you go. And whether you choose to learn is going to be a whole lot different than if you just actually see it and deal with it and then just move on.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so choosing to learn. That's an interesting conversation to have because, you're right. We all go through different things, and the way that we internalize kind of the lessons will completely change the outcome for different people, right? So I don't know. I guess I'm, curious as to how you've been able to really draw lessons from it. I mean, whereas other people, they go through the experience and don't learn, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. I feel like I've always been one of those people who just in general looks at things and goes, what can I take away from this? And that's just a part of me that's always asked questions, and I've always wanted to learn, and I've always like wanted to expand my knowledge. And there are certain people and they don't want to do that, and that's fine. I don't have anything against that. I honestly can't fathom not wanting to learn from like an experience or something, right? And my now husband, my second husband, he's one of those people to where like he'll go through something and he might see something in it and he might not. And that's fine with him. It doesn't bother him. But then later, years down the road, he might come back to it and go, that's probably what I should have seen in that. Versus me, where I like will overanalyze it to the point where like it's maybe like I tore it apart and then I tore it apart again. And it's like Legos and I just put it back together and then I just tore it apart again. And I'm like looking at each piece because I want to know everything about it and what that means.
Yeah, that's interesting. So just a desire to learn, it sounds like. And it sounds like you've really made that a focus of your life if you were, studying for your master's degree and all that. Let's talk about, something you said earlier about really focusing in on your ideal client as a way of growing your business. Maybe get into that for people listening. Like, what does that mean practically for people? What does that look like in terms of how you hone in on that and how you use that in your marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I talk about like looking at my ideal client, and I'll say ideal client, but I like interchangeably use client, buyer, and customer. And when I look at honing in on your ideal client, I'm looking at, are you talking to the most empowered buyer who's 1000% ready to hand you their card? Because if you're not, you are consistently going to wonder why people are coming to you and saying, yeah, your content's great and I can't afford that. Or, yeah, your content's great. Woo, good for you. And then like you never see anything else. It's like that woo girl syndrome. And then you also get those people who say, I would love to work with you. Maybe now is not the right time. And I don't hold anything against people who have objections. It doesn't bother me. It goes back to that like removing my emotion out of it. But when I'm looking at like creating stuff, whether it's content, an offer, or anything like that, for my ideal buyer, then I'm looking at the highest version. So I'm looking at how is my offer going to look at or affect, I guess is a better way to say it, their lifestyle. What is the transformation that I want to help them achieve? How is that transformation going to better that lifestyle that we've looked at already? Because when we're looking at all of those three things, then we're seriously able to look at all different aspects of people's lives. And we're not assuming anything about their lives, because that's another like mistake people make. But we're really able to just look at it and say, if you're going through this, here's a way I can help. And I think that's a part a lot of people miss.
Okay, that's really interesting. So looking at your ideal client, their lives kind of from a holistic level, and not just how much money do they make, or I don't know, because so many people, even before they get to this point, they like one of the objections that I hear for even wanting to create an ideal client and something to aim for is that, well, my business is for everyone. And they feel like they're leaving money on the table if they narrow in on one type of person, right? So maybe speak to that and why that's a red herring.
It's so funny because I've talked so much with so many different clients about why the quote, anybody who can buy is absolute bull. And it is so detrimental to your business because you actually think you're leaving money on the table by not niching down. And we've actually villainized niching down a lot and actually creating an ideal buyer. When in reality, you're actually leaving money on the table if you don't. Because then you don't really know who you're talking to. And if you don't know who you're talking to, then how are you supposed to actually create an insanely tangible transformation? How are you supposed to create content that makes people go? And I don't even just mean for social media. I mean for your website, for email marketing, for a flyer you're handing out on the street. How are you supposed to create stuff like that that speaks so directly to someone and makes them say, oh my gosh, I cannot fathom not participating in this, not buying this product, not having this, like, I don't know, Friday the 13th tattoo deal, like, in my life. So it's so wild to me every time people make the argument for not creating an ideal client, because when we think we're leaving money on the table, we're actually doing the opposite, and then vice versa.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think there are a couple of things that I think about when this subject comes up. First off, I think there's this misconception that okay, I mean, we've already talked about, I shouldn't rehash it all. We can, I love marketing. So this conversation is really interesting to me. And so like, I picked this apart, why people think the way they do about niching. It's just so fascinating to me. And I've worked in positions with people where this is the piece that they get wrong. And if they could figure this out, then it would completely change everything else they do, and their business would take off easily. But because they're not specific enough, and because their offer that, when you're unspecific, you can't, like you said, put together a no-brainer offer that people will raise their hand for and buy every time, right? So I love this conversation in this topic. And for anyone listening out there, if you don't have this piece right, put all your time and effort into getting this figured out so that you can actually create the right offers and start growing your business, because without it, you're going to be stuck. Let's talk about some other pieces of marketing that people commonly get wrong that you're helping them with. What would you say to that?
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I feel the part 2 coming on already. Like, let me just go ahead and say it.
Yeah.
Because I agree. It's one of those things where I could talk about this forever, because there's so many different parts of it. When we're talking about like things that I feel like people get wrong, or maybe just aren't hitting the mark on, right? Like, you don't even have to completely get it wrong, but maybe you're not hitting the mark on. I was actually having a conversation with someone earlier today, and I mean maybe a couple hours ago, about how we want to hold maybe hard conversations. And I have a lot of clients who have harder conversations. Maybe some of their buyers are about like maybe the education system or like emotional eating, or like things like that, or maybe like anti-racism trainings and things like that. I mean, like, we have hard conversations everywhere all the time. And if we're not facilitating those in a inclusive way and in a safer way, and you're just like broadcasting everything out to the public, that's not going to work for anybody. And that is one of the hardest things that like people are not getting, is like Facebook groups. They cannot be public. Like, public Facebook groups are not working anymore. Like, public profiles sometimes also don't work, but you have to know when. You have to know your audience. And that goes back to the ideal client conversation. You have to know who you're talking to. Do they want that like quieter, maybe a little more inclusive, like tighter space? Or are they fine just commenting on your like public Instagram account? If they're not, you're not going to get engagement. You're not going to get all the things you're hoping for. And then I think another piece of this that is insanely important is we're focusing a lot lately, and I say we as the collective, we're focusing a lot lately on virality. And that is the wrong place to be looking. Because when we're looking at virality, we're not paying attention to who is in front of us already right now. And I was telling this story yesterday of, I had a client who was upset that she only had 5,000 people in her Facebook group. And we had grown it from 500 people to 5,000 people fairly quickly. And I just looked at her and I said, I want you to think of 5,000 people in your house right this second. Could they even all fit? And she was like, well, no. And I was like, 5,000 people is a lot of people to even remotely sit there and talk to. And she instantly kind of snapped back from like wanting that virality, from like looking to reach millions at once versus focusing on who was in front of her to buy, and then also maybe getting some reach, and then looking at other ideal buyers and then other ideal clients to bring in. But those are like two really, really big ones for me lately.
Okay, so just to recap a little bit, so you're talking about building community and doing that in a format that isn't just your regular Instagram page, right? Creating something a little bit more intimate where you can have deeper conversations with your tribe, I guess, if you want to call it that, right? The people that follow you and are interested in what you do. And you would recommend probably doing Facebook groups or other types of groups like that? Is that what you would say?
I think there are definitely a couple different ways to do it. And I'm loving the different ways that even Instagram is coming out with right now, to where like they have their channels, or they have
Yeah.
like a lot of people are using Discord lately, and I'm in love with it. I think it's beautiful. Even some people are using Slack for a community, and I think that's wild, but I'm here for it. So I think Facebook groups are great if that's your jam. I think Discord's a lot of fun. I think like whatever you want to do. The Mighty is always fun. It's not really my thing, but people like it. And I think it's just about like not just relying on just that public face, right?
Yeah.
You just want to also have a way to just bring people in to your world.
Yeah. Instead of just, yeah, go follow me on social media. Right.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. I love that. The other piece that you were talking about earlier, which I think is really interesting, is this idea that, you can better leverage the audience you already have. And, where my mind goes is that probably means in the form of like, what are other products and services that your already buying audience would be interested in that you can add on, right? Whereas, yeah, I think so many people are caught up on continually chasing more clients when in reality, they wouldn't have to grow their business if they just did it right. The other thing too is you can leverage the current audience you have to get more clients. If you do that very well and strategically, right, you don't have to go find new people that have never heard about you, because there's so much in, if you think about the client journey, getting them invested in you, there's a huge process to that. And so to start with scratch with new people and bring them along for the ride and in a sense, expose yourself to them. I mean, that's a process. And so you might as well expedite that and start with the people that already know you, that are already fans of you, that are already bought into what you're doing. Is that kind of fair to say as far as summing up what you were talking about?
Absolutely. I feel like any successful business, and honestly, mine is no exception here, relies on repeat buyers. And when we're talking about repeat buyers, that's why I love focusing on community versus just new eyes. And community is going to honestly do so much more for you because, like you exactly said, they already know you. You don't have to nurture them as much. And it's not that nurturing is not important. It's just that there's a level of nurturing for new people that people in your audience don't require. Because I could go in and post a picture of my dog, and the people who know me are going to be like, oh my God, Stormy looks so cute in this little picture. And they already know who she is. People who don't are like, you have a hand tattoo? And I'm like, yes, if you've seen it, you've seen it. So there's just that different level of nurturing where you just, if your community is there, why wouldn't you just keep selling to them because they're already your ideal buyers?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great reminder for anyone listening out there. Let's talk about maybe the current phase you're in with your business and where you are trying to take it.
Oh man, I love this. Okay, so my current phase that I'm in is I just hit this past summer the 7-figure cash mark, and it was probably the coolest milestone I think I've ever done. I am officially financially free until I am 85, and I am 33 now. So that is probably the coolest thing I think I've ever done in my life.
Yeah,
And
congratulations on that.
thank you. And I honestly, the way I want my business to even remotely go in 2024 is so crazy that I say it sometimes, and it's very wild to me. So I've already accepted a couple of like guest speaker spots for 2024. I'll be doing an in-person event in Boston in February, and that'll be a lot of fun. But I want to start taking that a little more in person. I want to do in-person marketing workshops, in-person brand voice workshops. And then I want to bring my clients along for the ride. So I have recurring clients, and then I want to, a big portion of probably the second half of 2024 is going to be bringing in a lot of what I call pay what you can clients. So it's a lot of people who normally wouldn't have an opportunity to work with like someone who can really take their business to that next level. And I really want to give them that opportunity.
That's amazing. So it sounds like you're finding ways to give back. Is that one of the, I ask all my guests what some of the unintentional benefits of entrepreneurship are. Would you say that that is one, being able to give back?
That is absolutely one of my favorite things. I, at least monthly, at least every other month, if I try to every like month, couple of weeks, something, give a portion of my profits to a local or at least regional charity. So a lot of what I've done, October was dedicated to domestic violence. The November, I'm still researching a little more, but it looks like a lot of it is going to be going toward a lot of the conflict we're seeing right now. So it's definitely been a really, really big like plus for me, is to be able to take a lot of what I've made and help give it back to people with nothing like expected, because I had so many opportunities that like people extended their hand to me, that was the big thing I wanted to be able to do, was to do that back.
I love that. The show, I mean, the goal for me, the aim is to highlight how entrepreneurship creates freedom in your life. But I think, the aim of living a good life is to be able to also give back and do good in the world. And entrepreneurship enables that, not just with the business that you create, right? You can, if you're doing it right, you're serving people and solving problems that need to be solved. But then obviously being in a position like yours where you have, the income you need, now you're able to pass that on as well. And I think that's amazing. So thank you for being someone that gives back to the world in that way. I really appreciate that. I just realized that we're kind of coming up on our time. Where can people go to connect with you and work with you?
Absolutely. No, thank you. I appreciate that. I am notoriously more active on Instagram. So while we were talking about not just sending people to Instagram, I love hanging out on Instagram, but I don't just post and ghost. Please feel free to come DM me. I am at Kristen Unfiltered, and I adore interacting with people. I am not scared of DMs. As long as people aren't just sending me obnoxious photos, I'm good with that.
Okay. We'll have the link to that in the show notes, so anyone listening can go there to check that out. And then your website, what is your website again?
It is kristenunfiltered.com.
Okay. So just like your Instagram tag. Again, we'll have that in the show notes. Thank you so much. What's your final message to the audience out there?
My final message would probably be to be patient with yourself, because there's so much constantly happening and you are constantly evolving so much that patience is the only thing. That and gratitude, like they go hand in hand, and you cannot be angry or anxious if you find something to be thankful for, because you have no choice but to be patient.
Okay, that's interesting. I love that reminder to be grateful, to be patient. I think those are key virtues for anyone trying to be successful out there. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an awesome conversation. For anyone listening out there, please, make sure you subscribe to whatever channel you're listening to this on and share this with others. That really helps us out a lot. Thank you so much for listening and for being here. And again, thank you, Kristen, for being an awesome guest. I'll see you guys in the next one.